Welcome to BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week, and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we're going to take a look at last week's regional championships and this week's state championships.
Yeah, and we've got really a packed house as far as Big Country goes. We've got 6 teams going down to Arlington to play in-state championship games. So a whole lot to talk about. We only lost one team from last week, and that was a really good Albany team. Suffered a loss, a setback against Stratford. So they finished their season in the state semifinals. But we've got, like I said, 6 teams, 3 and 6 man, with May and Westbrook playing for the D1 title. Strawn will be taking on Motley County and for D2 title. Hawley's still alive in Class 2A D1. They'll be taking on Shiner. We got Brock in 3A taking on Lorena, and then Stephenville in 4A D1 taking on Austin LBJ. So a whole lot of action this week, and a lot of our teams still in action with an opportunity to win a state championship. So that's a pretty cool deal.
Before we jump into this week's show, we need to thank our primary sponsor, Capital Farm Credit, with offices all over Texas, including Stanford and Abilene. Buy your own slice of Texas with Capital Farm Credit. Together, we're better. All right. And before we jump into last week's games and this week's games, we had to say goodbye to a Texas legend, a high school football legend. Dave Campbell passed away, and he will be sorely missed. He's probably contributed more to high school football in the state of Texas than any journalist in history.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to agree with that. And he's a guy that was an inspiration to me on a lot of fronts. I didn't know him well, but I got to share a press box with him on many occasions during my time at Baylor, where he worked for the Baylor Bear Insider while I was working for the student newspaper out there. And just that was a really neat experience for me. And then obviously you and I have read and looked at his magazine year after year after year for really as long as I can remember. So just a guy who was a huge advocate and ambassador for high school football. I think in a lot of ways helped make Texas high school football what it has become. And like I said, in just my case personally, an inspiration in some ways for the site that we're running now. So I'm just I was really saddened to hear the news that Mr. Campbell had passed away, but he will be remembered for a very long time. That's quite a legacy he leaves.
I did get to meet him at Floyd Casey Stadium at some Baylor games. He used to be a regular up in the press box for Baylor games, and he was always nice to everyone. And I was just a small time sports writer from the Killeen paper, and he treated me as well as he treated anyone. He was a gentleman, a great guy, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to meet him.
Yeah, and the really cool thing is that he was basically, working in one capacity or another almost right up to his passing. So a guy who was able to do what he loved doing for almost his entire life, which I thought was really cool, because I graduated from Baylor in 2007, and he was still, covering games, asking questions during press conferences. And he was doing that well past my graduation. So a guy who was a media legend, like you said, and who is, really in some ways kind of the face of Texas football coverage. So yeah, I hope that his family and everyone is able to come to peace. But like I said before, a guy who just leaves an enormous legacy.
And with that, Dan, we're going to jump into the state championship games. We've got 6 teams still alive from the Big Country playing for state championships. We'll start at the Class 1A Division II level, where Strawn is going to be taking on Motley County. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Wednesday at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. A couple of 14-0 ball clubs going head-to-head.
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun game. Obviously, neither team has lost yet. Both have really been very dominant this year. So it's going to be a matchup between 2 teams that have very much earned their way to this game. So obviously Strawn has a lot of experience there. Motley County has been a really strong program for a long time. So neither is going to be overwhelmed by the moment. It's just going to be 2 good teams playing each other, and we'll see how it shapes up.
One thing that jumps off the page about this Motley County team. Now they've played comparable schedules, as you would expect by this point, going through the playoffs, but Motley County is a ball club in the 6-man level that's only allowing 15 points per game. But you're giving up 15 points per game in the 6-man ranks. That is some serious defense. And now Strawn's, granted, Strawn's explosive, a lot of speed, but this is going to be an interesting matchup. Something's going to have to give here.
Yeah, that's the thing that's going to be really neat is you've got a strong team that is capable of scoring in triple digits without too much trouble against a Motley County team that does not give up a lot of points. So it's going to be kind of a fun matchup in that way. And one thing that's interesting about this is both of these teams defeated Westbrook early in the season, which is a Division One state qualifier. So it gives you some. I mean, they have a handful of common opponents there. And one of them is a fellow state qualifier. So pretty interesting matchup all around.
On the subject of Westbrook, they'll be taking on another big country preps area team, May, at 14-0 against Westbrook, 10-4. That's going to be at 11 a.m. Wednesday at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. Westbrook played about as tough a schedule as you can possibly play at the six-man ranks, and they fought through it. They suffered their losses early on, but they're playing great football now, taking on a May team that's just been dominant all year.
Yeah, I mean, we just mentioned it, but Westbrook was a team that played both Division II state qualifiers and was very competitive with both of them. They played an extremely difficult non-district schedule. Came out of that with a handful of losses, ended up with 4 losses then, but have just rattled off win after win since, and have been playing really, really well against a May team that I don't think anybody is surprised to see in this situation. This is a May team that was a state qualifier, obviously. Last year, and I think they were kind of viewed even going into the season as the state championship favorite in Division One. But this Westbrook team's tough, and they're going to have to play a good game to beat them.
You want to take a look at some of the powerhouses that Westbrook went up against. They did play Motley County, as you had mentioned. They played Strawn, they played Garden City, Sterling City. These are all major league powerhouses at the six-man level. And you know what? May didn't exactly have an easy slate either. May is so good these days that really nobody non-district really wants to tangle with them. So they're up against one good team after another. There's no cupcakes there either.
Yeah, and even in the playoffs, you look. May had to beat an undefeated Jonesboro team in the region semifinals. They had to beat a really good Water Valley team in the region championship game, and then they had to come from behind and win a thriller against Abbott in the state semifinals to get here. So that's a very battle-tested team as well. One thing I like about Westbrook is you mentioned they played the Sterling City early in the season, lost. They were able to come back and beat them in the region final to advance to the state semifinal, where they kind of thumped Happy 54-20. So they've obviously improved throughout the season. May's been good all year long. This is going to be a big time matchup for a state championship, and that's what you want. You want to see two teams playing at their best when this time rolls around. I think that's the case for both of these squads.
All right, now we're going to jump up into the 11-man ranks. We'll start at Class 2A D2. We had to say goodbye to Denny Faith's Albany Lions. They ran into just a great Stratford team, losing 35-14. And Dan, you were on hand for that one.
Yeah, I mean, this was one where going in, I thought these were two pretty similar teams, two pretty similar programs. And as it turned out, Stratford was just a little too strong up front on both sides of the football. This is a big physical Stratford team, and they did something that not many teams have done to Denny Faith really throughout his time at Albany. They shut down the Albany run game completely, held them under 40 rushing yards for the game, forced them to be one-dimensional through the air. And they hit some big plays, but it just wasn't enough to sustain drives. So Stratford was able to pull away in the second half after a really thrilling first half that Stratford scored right before halftime to go up 17-14 at the break, and then shut Albany out the rest of the way, scored 18 unanswered points and was able to come away with the 35-14 win. But that loss takes nothing away from Albany or the season that they had. This was a really, really good Albany team. They just unfortunately ran into a team that was a little bit better last week. But I know Coach Denny Faith and his team was really disappointed, because I know that they thought that this team had the ability to get back to Arlington. I think it did. It's just on that particular night, Stratford just had too much for them.
All right, and with that, we're going to jump up to the Class 2A D1 level, where the Holly Bearcats, a big country ball club, will be playing for a state championship against Shiner, and that is set for 7 p.m. Wednesday at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. Holly at 15-0, Shiner at 15-0. Holly got past Marlin last week, Dan, 19-12. I was worried about that one because of all the team speed that Marlin possesses, but Holly managed to keep them from getting to the edge. They turned everything inside, and that's where Marlin was a bit weak, as you know, on the inside, kept them from getting to the edge and won the ball game.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that was a pretty good game to have won coming into this one against a Shiner team that, if we're being honest, I don't think a lot of folks around the state are going to give Holly a great shot in this one, just because Shiner has been so good this year with the Brooks brothers in the backfield, Dalton and Doug Brooks, who have just been running wild on everyone. This was a team that throttled Refugio a couple of weeks ago, that has a non-district win of a lopsided non-district win over a 3A Wall team earlier this season, and has really just been running on everybody. But I think it was a good experience to have played a Marlin team with some D1 talent of their own in the backfield, and to do what you just mentioned, be able to keep them from getting the edge, forcing them to the inside. Because I think that's going to be a similar formula they're going to have to follow if they're going to slow down these Brooks brothers, who have just been so good this year. But the one thing about this is Holly defensively has been unbelievably good. Even in the playoffs, you look, I mean, they played a Coleman team that was undefeated going into that game, held them to 7 points. Cisco, who was really rolling at that point, held them to 14. And then last week against the Marlin team that just really explosive, held them to 12. So they have not allowed more than 14 points in a playoff game all season. That will probably change this week, but if they can do some of the things they've been able to do defensively, maybe they can slow Shiner down enough to stay in the fourth quarter. And that's really the key to anytime you're trying to get an upset is keep the game close into the fourth quarter, give yourself a chance, and then see what can happen in those last 12 minutes. So we'll see. I'm not going to put it past Mitch Abel's coach football team. I think he's a guy who will have his team ready. But we're just going to have to see if they can find a plan to slow down those Brooks brothers and get Shiner bottled up.
Well, if there's one Class 2A Division I school with a defense that might have a shot at slowing down Shiner, it would be Holly, who's allowed only 7 points a game through 15 dates now. 7 points a game with 7 shutouts. So it really doesn't get much better than that. We'll see. But nobody's been able to shut them down yet. We'll see if Holly can, but they've got just about as good a defense as you're going to get at that level.
No, then that will be a challenge, but I do think it's worth mentioning that there have been plenty of games throughout the years where people looked at it on paper and said, this team's not, they've got no chance. And it was a close game in the fourth quarter. We saw one a few years ago with Hamlin against a Mart team that I don't think a lot of people thought that Hamlin would be in that game in the fourth quarter. Hamlin had a chance to win that one, made a few too many mistakes. But so this is, I mean, here's the one thing is if anybody believes they can win this game, Holly believes. They have no reason not to. They're 15-0. So they're going to go into this expecting to play well and expecting to have a chance to win. And we'll just have to see if they can do the things necessary on the defensive end to slow down that Shiner team enough to do it. They're also going to have to find ways to move the ball and score, but it should be a fun game. It's just a really cool deal because Holly's just going nuts right now. This is their first state championship appearance. They made it to the state semifinals for the first time this year. This is a truly historic run they're on. And that part's really awesome because I think when you and I got out to Abilene, the thought of Holly making it to a state championship game, if we're being honest, was not one that we, could foresee. So it's really, really amazing the job that Coach Abels has done, and really cool the opportunity they have in front of them right now.
We're talking about a program that went about 40 years without a playoff win, 40 years or more, and they're going to the state championship now. There's people that never thought they'd see the day. Yeah. When the Holly Bearcats be playing for a state championship, and yet here we are. So it is good to see. And Mitch Abels is a great guy and a great source for us. And it's good to see him have this kind of success. It really is, because he's really one of the truly great guys in our area.
And honestly, I'll bet they have no problem whatsoever going into this as the underdog. I'm sure they're relishing that having people tell them you can't win this game. I'm sure that's something that they're excited about, because
they'll be hearing that all week.
Yeah, they've seen what this team's capable of. They know what they can do. And if anyone, like I said, if anyone believes they're going to go in there and compete well, this Holly team will be it. And it's going to be a fired up bunch. So it should be a fun game on Wednesday night.
All right, before we go any further, we need to thank our sponsors, beginning first and foremost with Capital Farm Credit, who brings you these Wednesday night podcasts throughout the school year. Also, for the love of the game broadcasting, and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of K-Lakes 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, KWKQ 94.7 FM out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is for the love of the game broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Baird Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. One of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. If you're in the market for a new vehicle or used vehicle, give him a shout at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham up at Baird Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. And finally, Phil Hill of the Abilene Realtors Group. Big supporter of local athletics. If you're in the market, give him a shout at 325-669-5153 or visit his website at philhillproperties.com. All right, now we're going to jump up to the Class 3A Division I level, where the Brock Eagles are going to be playing for a state championship game. Another one of our Big Country Preps coverage area teams will be facing Lorena, 13-2. That's set for Thursday, 3 p.m. again at AT&T Stadium. Brock has been playing lights out. They did run into a great Mount Vernon team last week and had needed overtime to win that one. That's about as tough a game as they've had all year. But I will say this, that Mount Vernon team was great. I mean, that was a great team that Brock won, and had to go to one of the strangest gadget plays I've ever seen in all my years of watching high school football. Beat him in overtime with a center eligible pass to Nathan Jones, the standout tight end, who lined up at center. They had a big shift to the right, moved their guard and tackle over to the right side of the line, left him on the end. He snapped the ball from the end of the line, played possum for a little while, and everybody just left him. And then he ran over to the corner of the, ran into the end zone, did a little out pass, and there wasn't anybody within 10 yards of him. It was one of the strangest plays I've ever seen. But I didn't think that Brock would need to resort to a gadget play to win, but Mount Vernon put him in that position. Mount Vernon was a great team.
And who knows how long they've had that play kind of in their pocket, waiting to have an opportunity to run it. But that was a really good opportunity, I think, for them. Obviously, you needed to win the game to advance, but I think that was a good chance for them to face that kind of test, because they really had not all playoffs long. So this was an opportunity for them to get tested not only into the fourth quarter, but into an overtime period as well, and find a way to win it. Like you said, pulling some tricks out of their bag. But
one thing that I'm going to interrupt you here. One thing that was really impressive about that is the fact that they were up 21-7. All right, at the break, Mount Vernon came back, scored 3 straight touchdowns on them in the third quarter, and went up 28-21. So basically stripped the momentum completely away from them. They lost a big lead and had to regain it, which is really tough to do under those circumstances against a team that good.
Yeah. And now they get an opportunity against the Lorena team that at 13-2, it's going to be a very talented football team. This is a team, anytime you're playing in a state championship game, you're playing a team that's gotten some big wins and has done some special things. And don't let that record fool you. This Lorena team, like a lot of those teams from that Waco area, is going to have a lot of speed in the backfield. They're going to be able to move you up front. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. We'll see I think they may have faced their biggest test last week. I think, like you said, that Mount Vernon team was just really, really good. And that was 2 years in a row where Mount Vernon was a potential state championship caliber team and lost in the semifinals. Last year, it happened to Jim Ned in a thrilling game. This year to Brock. But so a big test for Brock. We'll see if they can finish the job this week against Lorena.
All right, now we're going to jump up to Class 4A, Division I. The Stephenville Yellow Jackets at 15-0 will be taking on Austin LBJ at 15-0. That is set for 11 a.m. Friday, again at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. I was on hand at Frisco for this ball game last week, which Wichita Falls Hershey gave Stephenville all they wanted, 30, which you expect for a state semifinal. Stephenville over them 38-35 in a game that had 6 lead changes. And it was just one lead change after another. In the second half, Stephenville went in with a 3-point lead in the second half, and then they just basically did a touchdown swap for the entire second half. And then Stephenville finally got the last lap. But that was a great game, and Hershey was that was an 11-2 ball club, but they were absolutely great.
Yeah, and I thought that would be a really good game, because Hershey's a team that always has speed. They always have a lot of athletes, and they've been honestly kind of knocking on that door for a long time now. When you look at what they've done the past 4 or 5 years, it's pretty remarkable what that program has become. But to play Stephenville, a team that was playing as well as they were going into that one, I think a lot of people kind of expected them to not necessarily blow out Hershey, but to handle them. But it was definitely a challenge. But I think that this Stephenville team's gotten really good this playoff run at kind of answering those challenges. You look, they had to come back to beat Argyle, scoring late to win that one. They had to come back from a 7-0 halftime deficit to beat Melissa. They were able to extend a lead there, but then they had to hold them off. And then last week, like you said, was a back and forth deal with Hershey. So this is a team that is accustomed to being in tight pressure type situations in the fourth quarter and coming through in those situations. And this game's going to be really interesting, because this LBJ team is extremely talented. This is a team that, like Stephenville, is 15-0 this year. What's interesting about this matchup is these two have been ranked 1 and 2. LBJ's been number 1 in Class 4A Division 1, while Stephenville's been number 2 for a long time. So this was one that the pundits got right. They had those two teams as the top two teams in the classification, and now they're playing for a state championship. So you can't ask for a whole lot more than that.
All right. And I think it's important to mention that we will be on hand in Arlington. Big Country Preps will be on hand to cover all of our area state championship games in Jerry World, which is always a fun experience. It's always great to go there, and it just never ceases to amaze me every time I go in there. Just the sheer magnitude of that place. It's unlike any venue you'll ever go in.
No, and the cool thing too is this is I think this ties for the most area schools that we've ever had in one of these situations. But this is the first time we've had this many playing in the kind of the festival deal at Arlington. So it's going to be really cool to have this many games within 3 days in the same venue. So it's kind of, if you're an area football fan, I mean, this is going to be a pretty neat experience. I mean, this time of year is always fun. I love watching these games and covering these games every year anyway. But it kind of adds an extra element to it when we have as many teams as we do in this situation where you've got 3 straight nights of games, or 3 straight days of games involving our team. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to go down there and get to cover these teams and see if they can come home with the state championship medal.
Well, we got six teams from our coverage area that are shooting for state championships, and that gives you a sense of appreciation for the quality that we've got in the Big Country Preps area. It's there's a lot of great teams here, a lot of great coaches, a lot of great players.
Yeah,
we are blessed to be able to cover them here.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is a lot of our teams beat other great teams to get there. When you talk about Cisco, you talk about Coleman, you talk about Forsan, Santo, some of these others that we had that were Jim Ned. Obviously, you can't leave them out. Some of the other teams that were in that mix that were big tests for these teams on their way to state too. So a great season for the Big Country. It's been a ton of fun covering it, and I'm excited to finish it in Arlington.
I think it bears mentioning, and I'm just going to go ahead and mention it. We get some people taking pot shots at us online, on Twitter, on Facebook, etc., for our coverage of Brock. And I think it's important to mention that when we started this business, we expanded the borders of what would normally be called the Big Country, and we included a number of teams, a number of schools that weren't really getting much coverage anymore. We included Forsan, we included San Saba, we included Brady, we included Heiko and Santo, and Brock being one of them. And oddly enough, the only team that really gathers any complaints, people throwing rocks at us for covering, are the Brock Eagles. Nobody complains about Brady or San Saba or Forsan. I think if you asked about those teams, people would be like, yeah, right on, cool, get the kids some coverage. Well, you know what? I think we ought to just have the same attitude about Brock also. They're a bunch of teenagers also that aren't really getting a lot of coverage, and we're covering them. They're just outside the Big Country area. Lighten up. Lighten up, dude.
Yeah, and that was the response I had to one of the folks that kind of objected to it was, and this is my God's honest opinion, is we're in the business of covering kids. We want to get kids coverage. If Brock was getting a ton of coverage from the DFW market, we probably wouldn't be covering the way we do, but we want to get these kids covered. And that's what it's all about. That's it's the exact same concept with Forsan, with Santo, with Heiko, with San Saba, with all of these others that we've added. The entire purpose of this website and what we're doing is to cover kids, and because we feel like what they're doing deserves recognition. So I've really enjoyed covering Brock, just to have all the other programs that we've added. They've been great additions to what we're doing. It's been a ton of fun getting to know those coaches and getting to follow their programs. So that's not something either one of us will be apologizing for. And I hope that people understand that our motives is simply to cover these kids. We really want to see these kids that are doing things worthy of recognition get that recognition.
The only thing Brock is guilty of is being good at what they do.
Yeah.
Just under Hugh Sandifer, the only thing that Wiley was guilty of was being good.
Yeah.
That's enough to get people not to like you.
Yeah.
Some people.
Yeah. And that happens, but like I said, we're in the business of covering kids, and I'm excited to see what Brock can do down at state, just as I am our other teams. It's going to be great seeing Holly, seeing Stephenville, and seeing our 6-man schools as well. These are programs we've been following all year long. And a big part of the reward of what we do is getting to follow these seasons through to their end. So it's going to be a lot of fun seeing how many of these teams can finish the job.
And that's just about going to wrap things up for tonight's Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we have 3 separate subscription packages here at Big Country Preps. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription for $4 a month. And we've got an annual 12-month subscription where we knock that price down to $3 a month. 12 months, a full year of Big Country High School athletic coverage for $36.
We'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, it is available for purchase. You can purchase a digital download for just $7. We also have some prints and keepsakes available, so make sure you check those out. But as you're scrolling through the site, you'll notice we take a whole lot of photos from these events that we're at, something we enjoy doing and something we're very proud of here at bigcountrypreps.com.
All Big Country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.